Good morning and welcome to the Talk of the Town. I'm Sonali Vanika. My guest this morning is Ambika Satkunanathan, human rights advocate, also recently appointed to the Board of Trustees of the UN Voluntary Fund for Victims of Torture by the UN Secretary General. Good morning and welcome, Ambika.
Good morning, Sonali.
When we speak of human rights, they are indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated, and no one right is more important than the rest. However, we are increasingly seeing instances where some rights are being curtailed arbitrarily by the state, citing the purported prioritization of other rights.
As you very rightly said, they are interdependent. But what we have seen historically is that civil and political rights have been given more importance, even by human rights activists, while socioeconomic rights have been ignored. So socioeconomic rights are, right to education, right to health, right to livelihood. And you need both those rights because someone who is struggling to make ends meet, to feed their children, is not going to want to go out there and protest about the online safety bill. So this is a strategy also used by states to prevent people from holding, the government accountable. And what we see is that states also use things like national security as an excuse to crack down on civil and political rights. But some civil and political rights, the Constitution actually allows, even the international law allows them to be curtailed in times of crisis, like a public health crisis or a national security crisis. But there are certain other rights, like your protection against torture, which a state cannot derogate from, which means it has to respect it all the time. But what we see in reality, for instance, in Sri Lanka, we see the state and successive governments, they actually ignore both sets of rights. Citizens aren't actually, they aren't able to enjoy their civil and political rights, like, freedom from arbitrary arrest, freedom from torture, freedom of assembly. At the same time, there are socioeconomic rights like right to livelihood, even right to health, right to education. Those aren't adequately protected.
Because since you've worked extensively in the peace and reconciliation space, let's speak about an area that often gets deprioritized, that of transitional justice. Sri Lanka needs truth and accountability, but most importantly, it needs to win the trust of victim communities. Can we discuss this in light of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that is to be set up, the Office on Missing Persons, the Office for Reparations, as well as all the ad hoc attempts at transitional justice, including the LLRC Parnagama Commission?
Yes, what we see is now I would like to go to a statement there were 4 statements made by different groups, networks from the North and the East, that work with affected communities. What they said was that they do not trust the state, exactly because of what you just said. We've had various commissions, there are hundreds of recommendations, and not a single recommendation has been implemented. What they asked the government was to show good faith by beginning to implement some of the old recommendations. And I say that if they do that, they might even end up solving 50% of the problems we have. So why waste resources and pass yet another law and establish yet another institution that is not going to address the needs of the affected? Most importantly, they're not listening to the affected. They're not asking them what they want. They're not including them in establishing these mechanisms or processes that are supposedly for the benefit of the victims.
So what's the way forward then?
What's the way forward? We will say, well, firstly, the government should, generally, I would say, where lawmaking is concerned, what the government is doing now is bringing laws to protect itself, to curtail speech, or for the benefit of individuals. It needs to be more open and transparent. And if you're making laws, you need to be inclusive. You need to consult stakeholders, civil society, experts, be transparent about it. Where transitional justice is concerned, start by implementing the hundreds of recommendations we have. And also, for instance, stop taking over land in the north and the east by the military. Stop acquiring land, stop, occupying land, and also don't surveil the families of the disappeared. Don't visit intelligence agencies visiting civil society organizations and asking them, why are you organizing a protest? Why are you working with the families who disappeared? Do you support any former combatants with livelihood projects? Stop doing that, because that shows you look at the entire Tamil community with suspicion. And then what is there to build trust? I mean, that is where you start, right? We are equal citizens of this country. And if you look at the Tamils as possible, always possible aggressors or possible terrorists, potential terrorists, where do you then start to build trust?
All right. Thank you very much. Ambika Satkunanathan. Thank you, and it's back to the studio.